Hey everybody, my name is Matt and welcome to Live Connection. There's a new main series Pokemon RPG for the Nintendo Switch slated to release in 2019, and at the time of recording, Pokemon fans know almost nothing about this mysterious new title. With the phenomenal power of the Switch and rumors of the new game borrowing elements from The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, my mind has been racing with hopes and possibilities about what the next game will hold. So, here are 5 things I'd like to see from Pokemon 2019 for the Nintendo Switch. Number 1. Complete overworld gameplay improvements. The overworld in Pokemon can sometimes make the game feel like a true adventure, and other times just makes the game feel like a transition from one battle to the next. From Red and Blue all the way through to Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, every region's design just features linear routes that take you from one city and one gym battle to the next. Implementing a Breath of the Wild style overworld, where you can just go anywhere and reach any point in the region, taking any route that you want, would make the game really feel like an adventure again, instead of following linear paths from one town to the next. It would make discovering Pokemon in different areas of the map and wanting to explore everything the region has to offer that much more exciting. If possible, having seamless transitions from overworld to battle would also really enhance the experience, making the game world feel much more consistent and united. The introduction of having wild Pokemon appear in the overworld in Pokemon Let's Go is a huge step in that direction. And imagine being able to traverse this expansive region on the back of a Charizard or speed through the plains on a Rapidash. But more on that in the next point. Number 2. Cut features from past games to return. One of the most frustrating things as a longtime Pokemon fan is loving a feature in a certain game only to see it removed entirely from the next. The best example I could think of is when they introduced having Pokemon follow you in Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. I think it's safe to say this is one of the most well-received features, but it never returned until Pokemon Let's Go. I think the joy that players experience seeing the feature come back in full force speaks for itself, and if there's anything that the recent success of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate shows us, it's that cult elements of a game are always sorely missed by someone, unless they are downright bad, and the fan service and excitement that comes from bringing them back makes it worth re-implementing them. Wonder Trade, Egg Spin from Pokemon Platinum, the Poke-Pelago from the Generation 7 games, even Seasons from the Generation 5 games, and many more features like that are worth reintroducing if they make fans happy and fit into the new game. I also wanted to talk about Pokemon Let's Go some more because even though the features are technically yet to be cut, many of the changes and additions to the 2018 Switch game drastically improve the experience of playing Pokemon and are worth keeping in the new game. For example, the portable Pokemon box, wild Pokemon appearing in the overworld, and changes to the catch system are all welcome changes, even if fans like myself initially had trouble adjusting to them. There's a series of tweets by Egoraptor that I feel perfectly explain how I feel about the changes in Let's Go. Instead of having to start a wild Pokemon encounter and then see what the Pokemon is, being able to see them in the overworld was a huge improvement and took away one of the things that people always complain about when it comes to Pokemon, which is them being a tedious and grindy experience. And while they're hard to adapt to, the changes in Pokemon Let's Go are changes for the better in my opinion, and despite people not really taking that game seriously, I think that what it brought to the table should continue into further Pokemon games. I think making this game as diverse and content filled as possible is what's going to make it a revolutionary Pokemon game that will leave a lasting impression on players, something that can't be said for the previous 2 or 3 generations of games. Even putting the Pokemon box in your bag, which seemed like a busted change at first, was actually hugely beneficial to the game, because let's say, for example, you're halfway through Victory Road in Pokemon Let's Go, and if you were playing any other game and all of your Pokemon got down to no health, you've got one Pokemon with 1 health, you've got no healing items, you'd have to use an escape rope or use Dig or find your way out of the cave, fly back to a Pokemon Center and heal all your Pokemon. Or in Pokemon Let's Go, you just dip into your Pokemon box and replace your party. But what difference does that make? Like, yes, it makes the game easier on paper, but it also makes the game far less tedious and also encourages using multiple Pokemon, which is something that I really respect, especially if they're going to make a game that features most, if not all, Pokemon. It's going to be a lot more beneficial to be able to constantly rotate Pokemon in and try different types of Pokemon, and that's exactly why I think the changes in Let's Go were so important, even if they were overlooked originally. Number 3, reintroduction/elaboration on the partner Pokemon system from Let's Go. Now, speaking of returning features, something I really enjoyed about Pokemon Let's Go is having a reliable partner and companion throughout my adventure that felt like so much more than just a starter Pokemon. I never realized how insignificant of a role regular starter Pokemon play during the adventure, other than being your first and oftentimes strongest companion. Playing through the game with a partner that was bursting with personality while also being an absolute powerhouse in battle was a huge enhancement to the experience. experience. Going forward into the new games, I'd like to see a mix of these partners and what starter Pokemon usually offer in terms of the capacity to get stronger via evolution and to have choices in who accompanies you on your adventure. Now, if you'll allow me to indulge myself for a minute, I'd like to share my personal vision on how I would like this system to be implemented. I've spent a great deal of time daydreaming about this for a few years, and it will feel good to share it with the world. Before Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon were released, it was the general assumption that Pokemon Stars was going to be the follow-up to Pokemon Sun and Pokemon Moon. Since that was never the case, I imagine that the Stars scenario would be reborn into the new game as Star Pokemon. Star Pokemon share many similar traits with your partner in Let's Go, such as being a Pokemon whose destiny is mysteriously intertwined with the players, and the Pokemon being extremely powerful despite being in its base form, small enough to ride on your shoulder. What makes these Star Pokemon special is that they can use a special power called Star Evolution to evolve into their higher evolutionary forms for the duration of the battle, with the same base power boost that the partner Pokemon naturally have. This will be a system that's similar in design to Mega Evolution. You'd have more than just the Pokemon in the box to choose from too. Way more. What I mean when I say that is that you'd have the choice of all of the starter Pokemon from every single generation of Pokemon, as well as 3 other Pokemon from each generation for a grand total of 42, 6 Pokemon from each region. We take Kanto for example, you'd get your typical Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle, but you'd also get like a Meowth, a Ghastly, a Dratini to choose from as well. And the same goes for every generation of Pokemon. With these Pokemon, you can choose the starter that you may have loved a past adventure with, but you've also got far more than just the fire, water, grass type choice. In fact, all 18 types are represented in this list. You'll notice 3 Pokemon that don't follow the traditional 3-stage evolution format, but they'll have other unique star evolution abilities, like Meowth being able to change into its dark type Alolan form at will, or Rockruff being able to star evolve into any of Lycanroc's alternate forms, each with their own secondary types and abilities to add variety. And speaking of variety, another cool element of star Pokemon is that they'll dictate where in the region you start your journey and what legendary Pokemon you'll be able to catch. This way, choosing a different starter will also give you a completely different experience in the game. And just saying, if you're having trouble choosing between these 42 Pokemon, having a Pokemon Mystery Dungeon style personality test to choose your partner would go a long way as well. Of course, to really pull off this feature and completely skyrocket the game's replayability, one long requested but never acknowledged feature should be added. Number 4, multiple saves. Considered to be taboo as far as Pokemon is concerned, having multiple save files or trainers would allow the player and any of their friends who want to take part a chance to experience their own adventure with the starter of their choice. In my opinion, including this feature wouldn't be as hard as it may seem if it's executed in the right way. I think it would be cool if you could create a custom trainer with their own starter each time and start your adventure anew. If there is a limit to how many Pokemon each file can keep in their Pokemon box, I can't see there being an issue with keeping multiple files. Something like a local trainer network that replaces PCs at Pokemon centers and allows trainers to exchange Pokemon between save files in a shared PC box would go a long way for this feature too, especially if it integrated with Pokemon Bank, something we all know is coming to the Switch around the release of the new game. Number 5, little to no new Pokemon. Now, I think this is a bit of a controversial opinion, and there's even members of Live Connection who disagree with me on this, but I don't really have very much insight into how Game Freak develops Pokemon, but I bet my bottom dollar that the effort put into having to design and put new Pokemon in the game takes away from the ability for them to upgrade other parts of the game, which, you know, if we're looking for an overworld adjustment or any of these other features to be put into place, I think that needs to happen. Now, if you noticed in the past 2 generations of Pokemon, Generation 6 and Generation 7, they introduced less Pokemon overall, which I think was kind of a welcome change after Pokemon Black and White's 156 Pokemon, which some of their designs are literally trash. What's important to know here though is that part of the reason why they didn't introduce as many Pokemon overall in the past 2 generations is because they also introduced features like Mega Evolution and Alolan forms as well. And so even though I don't really want there to be new Pokemon in this game, I think adding more alternate forms and Mega Evolutions would be a fantastic addition to the game, because it seems like it would be easier to build and develop new forms for older Pokemon, and I'm not just talking about Gen 1 Pokemon here, than it would be to design design new Pokemon entirely. And so I think to really be able to spend the most amount of time developing this game, I think less effort has to go into making new Pokemon available and more effort has to be put into making the overall gameplay a better experience. And something that a lot of people have asked for a long time is having a game where all Pokemon, all 809 Pokemon are available in one game. And I think that would be worth doing instead of cramming even more Pokemon onto that list. And let's be honest, I think something that Pokemon fans are known for is being very reluctant to change. And I feel the same way about that. Every time a new Pokemon generation comes out, I feel this kind of reluctancy because I'm so used to the amount of Pokemon that there are now, and I've gotten used and accepted the Pokemon that currently exist, and I don't want there to be more. And while I don't want to succumb to that hatred of change, I do think it is the right direction to help the Pokemon series improve. In conclusion, I think that the new Pokemon games have the opportunity to make tremendous change in the same way that Breath of the Wild did for 3D Zelda games and Mario Odyssey did for Super Mario games. I think part of the reason why these games are so well received is because they were bold enough to completely change the formula and change it for the better. And I really do feel like Game Freak is kind of one of the more reluctant producers of games to change, and it feels like every single change in elements, especially ones that have been a long-standing part of the Pokemon universe, kind of come very few and far between over the time that Pokemon has been around. I mean, if you look at Pokemon Sun and Moon, I think they were received really, really well initially because they took out the gym system and they've changed things up for the first time since the games came out. And so I think change can be good, and I think change is what's going to help make this new Pokemon game the most memorable and the most fun game to play. So I don't know about you guys, but I'm waiting with bated breath for Nintendo to finally share some news with us about what this new game is going to be. And honestly, I think I'm going to be pretty disappointed if it doesn't fit my vision, but I hope whatever the game turns out to be is a game that's worth playing. Now, thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next video.